Hi, everybody. Today, for our Always Creating Value, we're going to talk about some of the impressive learning that we've had from past podcasts. And Mark's going to share with us how we can apply that learning to our environments so we can all continue to add value to what we do. Each of our guests has had so much to say that's important that we've chosen a few of them to talk about today. And in doing the research, Mark and I talked about it and said, gosh, there's so much. Maybe we'll do it again. But for today, that's what we're going to do, is cover some of the learning. And Mark's going to share what that learning is and how you might apply it to your workplace. Mark, are you ready to give us some of your insights?
I'm Mark Fowler, and I'm a business reengineering professional. I help grow businesses, rebuild businesses. I'm a CPA, though inactive, but very, very involved with the CPA world and their clients, helping their clients in certain major situations, as well as bankers and other other professionals who tap into us or tap into me to help re-engineer companies. We formed the podcast because we wanted to stress one of the more important ingredients that we've used over the years to help businesses transform to new platforms, find new and better ways to communicate with each other and be more effective. And that what we found out was there was a consistent appreciation for and implementation of always creating value, always being aware of what's the next thing around the corner that we can deal with. What are the things that customers need to know about our products or our services? How can we help some of our customers be more effective as well? From a consulting perspective, it's helped me in being able to galvanize our clients and our teams to be able to be not so worried about what's wrong, but let's focus on what's right and leverage that knowledge and being able to, on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis, be thinking about what else can we do. Over the last year, we've tapped into leaders in the IT and AI business, a publisher, a managing partner of a major CPA firm in Los Angeles, a leader in the diversity and equity and inclusion world, and also in the corporate world. That was Marilyn Tam. And it's been more than exciting. And in some cases, as we've been doing some research for this particular episode, a bit overwhelming of all the information that's available, even just from 12 people. I even surprised myself. I went back and looked at my own episode and realized, wow, that, I often don't articulate a lot of this. And I think that many of the people that we interviewed also expressed the, not the concern, but the realization that they are not paying as much attention to what and how they're creating value as well. It was, one of the snippets that I went through on I'm trying to think about who it was at the moment, but she said that one of the things that was going on in this interview was that it was challenging her to really look at the kinds of things that she's doing to be able to, I think she said, bring consciousness, creating value to a consciousness on a day-to-day and moment-to-moment basis.
And I think that that's why this topic is so easy to tap into also, because we are all interested in growth. Even it's the way of the world. It's the way of nature. Its value is created by expansion and by increase and by moving into the best people that we can be. And the book that you have is one of the tools that really makes a lot of sense. It's easy to use, and I just love it.
Well, thank you. Well, we have kept that, the internal. I mean, we do talk about it, but, stopping and thinking and whatever, but we don't talk about doing the conversation, possibly because it has a prayer-like aspect to it. We knew we were bringing out something new, and I didn't want it to be something so new that I didn't want to give people the opportunity to say, no, that's getting into other territory and stuff like that.
I'm just saying the
but you made
application
me do
is
it.
there.
Huh?
the application is there.
Yeah.
And it's I'm very aware of how growth really is hand in hand with spiritual expansion, because every one of us, is a part. We're doing this together, whether you're a part of an organization, a corporation. We are individuals who are co-creating, coordinated movement in a same direction, hopefully, and adding value to everything that we choose to do in life. And a lot of that is meaningful, and you cannot divorce the whole of us, the spirituality, the wealth building, the relationship building, health, wealth. Every part of it is value adding. It's adding value to who we're becoming and who we can become.
We've got to reach out and help people be able to realize that things can be done. Sometimes you think you can't do it, and it's just around the corner.
Exactly. And I can't believe that we've been doing it for a year, by the way, and had so many impressive guests. But as we spoke, so many times you forget to look at what you've done to build on what you're going to do. And that's what I think you're really focusing on today, the big takeaways, and there's so many. We've only chosen a few to talk about today. But let's start with what you think is one of the takeaways you'd like to discuss. And I remember in our speaking, it was about learning how to learn was something we discussed. And we have an example of where you were who was most emphatic about that, learning how to learn.
Well, there were a couple of people that there were any number of consistencies in where people were coming from. Some people were a little like you said, more emphatic about it. I was thinking about Damien, who it was his experience of going to England to go to grad school. His dad had not insisted, but suggested that he go back to the homeland, even though he was born in America. His father was born in England, and he went to one of the oldest colleges and universities in the world. And that process, that very collaborative and interactive process, helped him and the people that he was working with, and the instructors, and the time and the quality of time that they helped with him and gave him. And I think he said he went fearful and came back powerful, and nothing could stop him. And he said just what he learned was the ability to learn. He was given the opportunity and the time to be able to get his hands around. He said I came from a world where we're focused on test scores and what is the final exam going to be, and he said that wasn't there. I guess the impetus there was that he was forced to look at another way to think, another way to be.
Part of it too was coming from the US school system and going into the University of Durham in England. Was the third oldest school in England. When I got there, I had thought I made a huge mistake. These were extremely intelligent people who were just on another level. And I was worried. I didn't know what I was doing there. But the funny thing about it is, as I got into it, that it was a very different style of teaching. We met, I had three, what did they call it? I had three basically classes a semester. And we would meet twice a month for each, just 2 times a month, but each meeting would be 4 hours long, and there was only maybe 3 other people in the class with me. So it was literally just, you would get together for 4 hours, and it would be discussing in a very open way the material. And it was a really, and then you would go away and you would do, you had assignments, don't get me wrong, and you had work to do, but it was, just go do it. And it was a very open-ended way to teach, but it it just changed how I learned.
And we're not sitting here and promoting that everybody should go to England to go to to a university, but we can create those different those challenges or those opportunities to think differently. One of the things you were talking about application. So many times on a day-to-day basis, we're focused on people confronting us with, no, that's not the way I think. And our immediate reaction is, no, this is right. Our first reaction is to protect what it is we have. And I think one of the things that came out of, not only Damien's discussion about, his master's program, but being able to look at other people's perceptions. This is something that, I've got an article like 25 years ago that talks about perception rules over fact, and how, well, we can take an opportunity if somebody confronts us and to say, well, instead of getting, automatically reactive, something Damien said, he said, zoom out, back up and be able to see a bigger picture. And when you see a bigger picture, what you're looking at is someone's perception, someone's gift, someone spent the time or read a book or whatever, and they've got this additional information, and as we often do, we hold on to it. I read this is important to me. Oh my God, this is the answer, as opposed to, this is very valuable to me. And so we can help others be able to express themselves by appreciating that perspective and not get caught up in, my agenda or their agenda, or being a little prejudiced about what we know.
Yeah, really, really good, because that was what we learned from Damien, that we tend to learn for a reason or an outcome, an exam, like you said, for a specific reason. Whereas what Damien was immersed in was learning for the joy of learning something new. And that joy of learning is what he has now applied to what he does. And he also applied it to our podcast, because he'd never done that before. And he was very uncomfortable with this new environment on Zoom, on a podcast. And as it turned out, he did a marvelous job. So his willingness to take an environment, immerse himself in, and learn was demonstrated in that podcast.
Yeah, and we can take that to heart, because we can in any moment turn a situation into a much more of a conversation by realizing that we're seeing something that, or hearing something that is completely different, not unlike Damien going to Europe or England to his name is Damien English. We keep calling him Damien, but his name is Damien English, and he's the editor of the California Society of CPAs magazine. And but we don't have to go to England to just get a different point of view that can not force us, but help us begin to see something that we never might have seen before.
Right.
Instead of holding on to our agendas and our observations and whatever, but realizing that somebody else can add enormous value to our learning. It's learning. When we interviewed Marty Cooper, who was the inventor of the handheld cell phone. And here he is at 93, and his biggest goal is to learn more. And he's really putting himself out there, because he's spending those time with all those young children, those kids who are giving him all kinds of new ways to do it.
Education never ever stops. And of course, for me, that's the most exciting thing in their life. I learn stuff every day. But part of education is accepting the fact that you can be wrong, and the importance of being able to say, I didn't know that, and I thought that I was wrong, and I've learned something new. It's hard for people to do. Once you have spent a lot of time learning something, and then to have to unlearn it and learn something new, it's not an easy task. and yet it's very important in the educational process. If you stop learning, if you are satisfied with what you are and what you know, and you don't believe you have to learn things, you lose the ability to learn. If
Oh,
that
wow.
isn't the scariest thing that I could think of, that you could get into a situation where you know everything and you can't learn even if you want to. Oh, that is so scary to me. I just can't imagine it. And yet many people go through life doing that. They get to a stage of life where they think they are very satisfied with everything they've done. They go out and play golf. They can do their job, the same job that they've done before, without learning anything new. And they forget, they lose the ability to learn. And as I said before, that's the scariest thing I can imagine. And yet I think most of our people in our society do that.
Not be afraid that just because you learn something, it disabuses you of the other stuff you know. You know, I think we get really fearful of that. Oh my God, if we learn something else, we want, you know. I remember when I first started writing, I went, I think it was first started writing magazines articles, it was years ago with Cal CPA, was I get these red lines back. Oh my God, I don't know how to write. You know, if I didn't know how to write, they wouldn't have spent any time editing me, right? And then when we did the book, and I got more red lines, I was so happy to have had the experience of writing articles because, and their red lines, because there was more red lines on that book than I could just, you know. You get to the point where you can, it becomes joyful. Oh my God, I made that mistake, you know. So, you know, and you know that the person is working with you, that it's going to be better, you know. And just like with those red lines, you know, talking to your spouse, talking to your boss, whatever, we're so afraid of talking about things when in reality, talking about them without having an agenda, without having an opinion, forces us to learn.
Yes, yes. And one program note is if we do mention a name and you want to know more about them, you can take that name Marilyn and put it on into our website, and you'll find Marilyn's podcast. You put
Right,
the name
Marilyn Tam,
Damien,
yeah.
and you'll find Damien, even without the last name. Just put that name in and you'll find their full podcast on our website if you are enticed to do that because of what we're telling you today. We'd love to see you.
Right, so just look up Always Creating Value podcast.
Always Creating Value, or just search Damien and on our website and it'll come out. So here is another big topic for you, Mark, and that's mentors. Obviously, the people that you carefully selected for this year's podcast performances were all mentors in their own right. But what's most compelling is each of them gave credit to their mentors. And one in particular, I think, really gave us an incredible story about a mentor, and that's Marilyn Tam. And I'm hoping that you'll be able to give us a little reference and overview of what we were so impressed with about her speaking about her mentor.
Well, it was interesting. Marilyn Tam is, very well known, as I mentioned, in diversity, equity, and inclusion. But she's also, famous for her world in the world of the corporate world, for having been the president several times of major corporations like Aveda and Reebok and Nike. I think she was the vice president of Nike. And being an Asian woman in an American world at a time when there weren't many women in the world, business world at that level. And one of those things, I had done a pre-interview with her because I liked doing the pre-interviews because I wanted to focus not so much on the accomplishments, but where those accomplishments were coming from. And one of the things we had a long conversation about initially was her grandmother. And her grandmother was boots on the ground, very animated, very proactive in the nonprofit world in Hong Kong. And she took her granddaughter with her. The granddaughter, I mean, Marilyn at 5, was going around meeting all the people that her grandmother was promoting to. I think she talked about, well, last year you gave 10 blankets. This year you're going to do 20 blankets, right? She didn't ever give the idea or the opportunity that you weren't going to contribute this year. And it was just wonderful to hear. And when we did the final interview, the first thing that came out of Marilyn's mouth was that, you know, thank you for helping me pay attention to a mentor that I knew, but I didn't realize was having had such an impact on me. And she talked about just being in that person's space. We didn't talk about how grandma, coached her or did anything like that. It was her dynamics, her energy that she was able to ride on. And at 5 years old, I don't want to use the word indoctrinated, but you absorb that kind of energy and that mindset that it's all going to be okay. It's we're going to accomplish this, and we're going to get more blankets. We're going to get more people involved. We're going to make people feel good about what they're doing, and make them realize that change is great. And grandma probably didn't even think about change. All she knew was that she was to be there of service, and clearly Marilyn is of service.
Yes, and it was no small feat. The charity that her grandmother set up and is still running today, right?
Yeah, right.
I thought about what provoked me or excited me or triggered me into adding value. And I think I have to go back to my childhood when I used to follow my grandmother around when I was about 5 or even around there. And my grandmother is not your typical Korean woman. She and my grandfather were basically an arranged marriage. They were still in the late teens when they got married, and she proceeded to have 9 children. So this is not your normal Korean woman that we think about. But she, with that background, decided that she was going to help people. And how she did that was because I was born in Hong Kong, and we were living in Hong Kong. And when I was a young child, there were a lot of people running from China into Hong Kong for a better life, escaping. And it's just sort of like what we have now in America, where people come here to try to get a better life. They want to add value and create a life that means something more than just basic survival. So my grandmother, because she saw this, she decided to start a blanket drive. What that meant is every winter, and people think of Hong Kong being in the tropics, but the winters get quite bitter because we're on the ocean and the winds come from north, meaning from China in. So it gets quite bitter, cold, because it's a damp cold. So she decided to start a blanket drive, and it became so successful that it became what we now call the community chest, and is one of the biggest charities in Hong Kong. And this is a lady with no formal training in any of this. And then she decided, out of her desire to help, to create value in a big way. It was just by first starting just giving blankets out, then hitting up everybody she knew for funds and support for blankets. And next thing you know, she's getting people housing, she's getting people education, she's getting people medical care. It just grew and grew and grew. And I was just a little kid. I mean, I was like 5 years old when I started this. I'll go with her on these trips out to areas that I probably wouldn't have seen for a much longer time, because I was just a kid, to understand how somebody just out of their desire can add value and make a huge difference. She's of course long past, but what she has added value to has become an institution. And so that in some way was embedded in my brain, that if you have a passion, if you have a vision, you can make a difference and you can add value in so many ways that ripples forever.
We often think that we can't do anything. We were talking earlier in preparation for this, we were talking about promoting and help promoting some of this material in a way that helps people understand that, one person can change the world. And it doesn't mean you change the world overall, but you change the world that you have access to. Grandma obviously changed the world. Can't imagine, maybe 100 years ago, 60 or 80 years ago, I don't know, 70 years ago, she was out doing something that's still there today in a robust way.
Yes, the community chest of Hong Kong.
Community chest of Hong Kong. Wow.
It is. And you and I talked about the fact that I grew up with my mom having come from Ireland and having started her own business here in the United States with 5 children. And I learned so much about running a business, but it wasn't till much later in my career that I learned that selling is talking about possibilities and never asking a question for which someone can say no. And that's what I took away from when you spoke about Marilyn's mom as a mentor. Every time she went to see one of her clients, she never said, "Do you want to do this again?" She said, "I know you're enjoying this and I know it's working for you. So how much more do you want to do this year?" And
of course you want 2 more hot dogs, right? Did you?
What a great thing to learn at 5 years old. I mean, that's very impressive. But I also learned from you on your podcast, because what I'd really like you to share is this concept that you have in everything you do, and especially when you're the mentor and you're working with companies that you're helping them get through crisis or succession planning or any of the number of very important business acumen you focus on. You've always managed to do what I call look at the donut instead of the whole. It's an old phrase that was, again, back to my youth in the donut factory in Cheshire, Connecticut, where it said, always look at the donut and not at the whole. In other words, don't look at what's wrong, look at what's right. And let's talk more about that.
Yeah, I don't know exactly when that kicked into my consciousness. In my upbringing from a professional perspective as a CPA, I obviously had a lot of auditing experience. And so in auditing, oh my God, you got to find what's wrong. There was one situation where I worked for a major insurance company for a while in computers. And I was charged of an audit of one of the divisions, computer operations. And, I came up with my laundry list, and I forget how it was orchestrated. This is so long ago, but when the head of the IT area for that got her report, she took me down piece by piece and helped me understand, and I've never forgotten it, that if you are avoiding what's right, you're only focusing on one, and this wasn't a troubled environment or anything like this. It's just we ended up becoming friends, and I have tried consistently, and as time went on and I started doing re-engineering projects more and more and more, and realizing that when you come into companies or any situation, it doesn't matter whether it's a family situation or whatever, but what is going right? What's going on? Let's tap into it. Let's swim with the current. If the current is taking us downstream, or we're going where we want to go, let's get there. And in many ways do what Grandma did, which is, grab a hold of what's, those next 20. Let's not worry about the fact that the party went wrong and I want to kill the people who didn't do it right. But what happened at that party that was right? Let's leverage what we're doing. And I think one of the things that we need to do today, and I think we're doing it, is focusing on all the right things we heard. All the, course, the interviews were tied to creating value, which in itself is a very positive perspective. But not everybody that we interviewed didn't regret some of the things that they didn't do, you know. And, you know, one of the interviewees said that she struggled when she got to a certain age. She struggled with what she had done. And then one day she woke up and she was thinking about her own value to herself and to others. And she began to realize how valuable she was to her family and to her mother and to her sister and the businesses that she'd been working with and whatever. And she said, I finally woke up to what I was doing right. And again, back to businesses, helping when you come into a business or a situation where there is tension and stress and whatever, and you can say, well, let's look at some other perspectives here. Again, back to learning. You know, we were talking about Damien English and you know what he went through, and then we also talked about how anytime during the day you can trigger into the learning by just putting yourself in a situation where you're going to learn something different. Well, all right, so we've been focusing on the fact that we're losing money and we're doing this and we don't have this and we don't have that. On the other hand, you can say, well, what can we ride on and up? That's right. You know, is it the customers? The customers love us. Our people or our teams are really there, and they're there for us, even though we're in trouble. Let's tap into that. Let's be able to do what we can do with what we have. I think on a day-to-day basis, we shortchange ourselves a great deal. Even in our conversations, we're in a rush. Everything's abbreviated, or you know, sometimes we miss some of the nuances that an interaction and a conversation because we're busy doing something else. And so everything from a focus on adding value to our interactions, whether it's saying something nice to the parking attendant or the valet, to whoever's working with you at the clothing store you're in, or at the bank, or whatever. So even at that level, I think it's important that, you know, we're practicing making somebody else's life, including our own life, a little better. And again, we'll go back to grandma. You know, if she needed blankets, that's what she went for. You know, and she knew if she could get blankets, she got them. You know, and I imagine there were other things. That was just a good example from Maryland. But take the opportunity to, you know, your best foot forward, the best foot forward for everybody. And I used to have I don't use it as much as I used to, but you know, I would walk into a situation, I would say there's 1,000 things to do, but there's only 3 things you have to do. And those 3 things are usually revolving around what you can do. And if you tap into what you can do, you will find out that of those 1,000 things, 500 of those things you thought you had to do all went away because you took care of what was right. You paid attention to what was right.
Right. And I think that in the environment, especially that you reside, that has to be so comforting for a company to have someone come in and actually point out to them in the crisis management or succession planning or whatever else they're working, that we have really good things we can build on here. And then once we know what we've got, we can decide how we want to test it or change it or tool it a little bit to get even more out of it. So I think that makes you a very viable partner for someone who's in a scary position. Their company needs help and you're there to help them do it in a positive way. That's really important.
Well, whether there's a problem is a week or a problem is a year or whatever, the last thing that people need to hear is you did wrong. Okay. And, one of the things that in our creative process, in my creative process, is to eliminate blame. We have a good faith agreement that we work with our management teams that these are the 6 things you do. This is things you need to be focused on. And these are the 6 things you shouldn't be doing. You shouldn't. And one of the 6 things not to do is, you got to leave blame at the door. Chances are that the person you're blaming or the situation you're blaming has nothing to do with it, and you're wasting valuable time stressing and distressing everybody else over something that either will evaporate or we'll learn from, or we may find out that what you think is going wrong is absolutely something that needs to do. It's just getting in your mindset's way.
But you were saying how the word blame is never used in your environment. But one word that we had used in our environment, in our podcast, was the word anticipation.
I called a client on the way to the office this morning who had called asking a question yesterday. And I know that having that answer so quickly for him is also important. And a lot of it is just anticipation.
Anticipation, meaning?
Anticipation, meaning thinking through what the next steps are, where is someone headed, and how best to get them there.
It's just tools in your toolbox. And so it's understanding those tools. It's what you do with those tools that ultimately then, is it helping you work more efficiently and effectively? Is it something that, you're just wasting a lot of time on? And so, I really look at it and I say, it's just, but to me, it's just like education. Education's a tool in your toolbox too. It's up to you what you do with it. And so every single day I look at it and I say, my motivation is how can I help, our client base, as well as, even within my own context of my own day job. I want to work smarter, better every day. And thinking about what I have in front of me, how can I leverage that, to be more efficient, more effective?
There's always something we can do more. There's always an opportunity to be more effective and more efficient. And it's interesting because with Devin, who is involved in productions, PR, big PR related engagements, she is also, her eyes, ears, and tentacles are always out there. Her little, antenna are always out there, paying attention to what's going on, course correcting, realizing there's a plan, but plans can always go wrong, and thinking of ways to anticipate. In essence, being part of that creative process that moves something down the path. Sometimes maybe it's not inventing something new, but it keeps everybody sharp so that if something goes wrong, then you can course correct. I know that one of the things that we have to do when we're working with clients is help them to understand that it isn't a cookie cutter, and nothing that we do in life is a cookie cutter. Things change, we're all familiar with COVID and pandemic, and everything changed. But I know why it's surprised most of us about COVID was that we're not like David. Many of the people in the world are not like David, and are not like Devin, who are paying attention, being present, constantly using their mind to not only prevent a problem, but take an advantage of an opportunity that happens because of something that changed. If somebody shows up, that wasn't supposed to show up or didn't think they were going to show up, and oh my God, it's a problem. No, it's not a problem. It's just an opportunity. So because they're trained to be able to course correct, and even though what they may anticipate doesn't happen, but they can take advantage of what does happen because of their sensitivity to what's really going on. They can sense it, they can feel it, they're involved, they're present. Creating value in a way that nobody would ever think of it because it didn't produce a product. It just made something better, made a situation better, made an opportunity to step into something else better.
Right. And it leads me to talk about something we discussed with Lynn Kitchen, and her concept what worked beyond anticipation, and she went into actually identifying your future value. She talked a lot about identifying your and knowing what your future value is so that you can be a much more inventive and futuristic team member. Want to talk about what Lynn had to say?
Yeah, well, I was referring to Lynn a little bit when I was talking about, doing the creating value. Lynn Kitchen is her name. And she was a wealth manager for many, many, many years. And now she's she's in the entertainment business. She's got her mentor, the world's best mentors. And it's now going across, started out on public television and now it's going all across the world. And she never, she said, I'm now a producer. I never thought. And she's working with her mother, who is 90 years old. They have their own little podcast and helping people in a joyful way realize that getting older is getting older, but it doesn't mean that you can't have fun and you can't create value and you can't be entertaining to yourself as well as others. Yeah, I love the fact that maybe sometime we can, we can drill down more with her on how she does that value, creating value. But the thing that that got me was that thinking about what your current value is and what your future value could be as well.
And so right here, right now, in the present value of who we are and what we bring to the table, let's learn to value it, all of that, more in an appreciation sense. Let's bring some gratitude to ourselves on how well we've done, rather than looking only to what's missing. That's the difference that I would like to see in myself first. And maybe someone out there needs to hear that today. But in myself, I'm endeavoring on a daily basis to bring more appreciation to my experience. I was mad last year that I just turned 70. Mad. It took me a long time to really just get over being angry and self-deprecating that I hadn't accomplished a certain amount of things that was on my accomplishment list up till that point, until a few months ago, as I've been caring for my 99-year-old mother and witnessing how much in grace that she is right where she is. And that is potentially a window to look at my future self, you see. So I'm looking down the road now too and say, well, what can I do and who can I be? What is the value of my future self 10 years from now, 20 years from now? At 70, we look forward, and medically, we probably have 30 more years. Most of us who are healthy now at 70, or if you're 60, you're going to live another 30, 40 years. How can we create value now in what does it mean to us? What will bring value to us in the future? What will make us feel expansive? What will make us feel more loving, more generous, more giving? It's not always in the having. I think it's in the being. Who can we be? How can we be more peaceful? How can we be more grateful? How can we be more appreciative? How can we bring value to others without expecting so much in return?
Any age, whether it's 2 or 89 or 90, you still have the opportunity. I mean, Marty Cooper is a good example. He's always creating value. Sometimes it may be just for himself, or maybe it is for the people he works with, but he's always creating value. And Marty's future value, and just about all our future values, are much bigger than we could ever be.
Our whole education system today in most places is backwards. The way people learn things is not being lectured to, it's by solving problems. Don't you agree with that? That the way
I would,
you
yes.
go out and learn is you're faced with a problem, you have to solve the problem. You have experience, so you've learned the tools that you need, and then you go out and solve these problems. Well, somebody has to create an environment where you can do that. You can't do this without being connected all the time, and that's why I have a conviction that the future of education is every student is going to be connected 24/7. And that doesn't mean that they're totally engrossed in their cell phone, but they are learning all the time. And anytime they want to get a piece of information, they can go to their cell phone. And when they go to school, they are being presented with problems that they have to solve. Somebody has to create this environment. And so there's an awful lot of work that has to be done. But of course, that's what we engineers are for, Mark. We have to anticipate what the needs of people and come up with solutions to those needs.
But there's this really interesting quote, is because it says, "Don't be what you were, be what you are." And in many ways, that bit of wisdom ties right into Lynn, because she's looking at what her current value is, but I can look at my current value, but I also have to look at my future value, because I got to make one more step forward to, what I think the better quote was, "Be what you can be," and that kind of really taps into what she's trying to do. This is how much I'm worth, and it's not in money. We're not talking about money. We're talking about ability and maybe spiritual or concern for the world or whatever. And she's thinking about, well, I can live another 30 or 40 years, so I better do something about it. So
Bringing value is a way of life, and bringing value in a mindset that shifts who and what I'm being. Why am I being in this world, if not to bring more value of that which is within me anyway, inherent? And it brings out this idea and he doesn't really go into this teaching more deeply, but I have sat in awe of the idea long enough to come up with this idea of my own, and that is that the value is that you're tapping into an unlimited source within. So we speak about resources and wanting to add value by finding resources, more resources, when in fact, the greatest resource that we have is the source within.
we all are going to live another day, in some way, maybe not, but we can add more value in something for everybody around us.
Right. And the thing that you and I discussed that I took from what Lynn had to say was that people in the corporate, especially work environment, are always trying to decide what their upward movement, where they can move to next. And if you take Lynn's approach, which is to evaluate your future value, you can sit down with the powers that be in a much more powerful way to say, here's the value I bring and will bring to the future of this company, and find out what that's worth to them. And I think that's a very powerful learning that we got from her that can be applied to the future. And she's doing that as well with the people that she's working with now. And I know that in the past, you've often talked to me about Marty Cooper and the 5 or 6 things he said to you and how to create value. And I want to make sure that we don't finish without you having an opportunity to share. Is that something that you're comfortable sharing at this point?
Yeah, and it evolved, like several of the things that evolved out of the pre-meeting that we often do I had a tendency of doing pre-interviews with people I didn't know, and I was also learning how, from, this is all creative, it's your concept, you're doing anything, it's creative. You never did it before, so I needed to get comfortable with the idea of talking specifically about the value creation. So in that meeting, I have to put my glasses on because I can't create enough value to have new eyes, whatever. There was really about 8 of them, and I went back to the different things, and he was looking at the qualities, and bless him, he said, I'm looking at you, he says, I'm appreciating the fact that you're basically, you're helping me create more value in this conversation. And he said, it came to my mind that and it just kind of rolled off of him. He said, first of all, it was humility and the ability to honor that you're going to make mistakes. And then he talks about open-minded, which is a bit about, the same thing about, humility, but being open-minded. The only way you're going to learn is being willing to have an open mind. And go back to Damien, he trusted in his father to help him go to college in a completely different, and be open to that. He had to be open to, you have to be open to meeting new people. You have to be able to open to their ideas. He also talked about the fact they need to like to learn. And he has that in spades, Marty has that obviously in spades. He also talked about that with all of this going on, you better have some enthusiasm. We were going over Devin's snippets. She talked about how excited she was working with her clients. She loves the entrepreneur. She loves the nonprofit. She said something about, yeah, I could probably consult to the Fortune 100, but I wouldn't have anywhere near as much fun dealing with people who are enthusiastic about their new horizons and the new things to do and the things that happen to them. She's just enthusiastic about it,
Well, let me answer you by saying that the commonality all of our clients share, whether they're a fast track emerging growth company or one that wants to be, or a nonprofit, or an author launching their new book, or a crisis situation, they are all people who are absolutely passionate about what they're doing. And that's what I love about what I do every day.
And this probably goes along with all of it, but he said, you got to have a good sense of humor. If you start taking any of this stuff so seriously that you go back to, looking at what's wrong as opposed to what's right, you're not gonna get too far. You also have to like people. He's an engineer. And oftentimes, engineering, certain sciences and even some professions, we have the tendency to be introverted a bit and not want to engage others or want to spend more time with our own ideas. And so if you're going to have these qualities, you better be happy at being with people. I think the other one was, I'm looking down at my little notes here, but the value of collaboration, and you're not going to get collaboration if you don't like people. If you're not comfortable, you're not going to reach out. You're not going to want to learn. You're not going to want to take advantage of the information that they have to offer, the benefits, the experience, the mistakes, the whatever, and doing it together. You don't invent a handheld cell phone without having probably hundreds of people involved in that process. And finally, perseverance. So those are 8 qualities that it just came out of him. It was, I guess it was, we were practicing what we preached, in that interview about connecting with each other, and he's always thinking, he's always amazing. And he said, I never thought about that. He says, I never even thought what to put together these qualities. And he said, it just came to me. I just felt like I had to, you're talking about always creating value. What are the qualities that allow you to do that? Now, I suppose if I'm not even sure I asked the question, I think he just stepped forward in his own energy. He just had to talk about it. And I surely wasn't going to shut him up. That's for sure. But sometime back down the road, we need to be thinking about asking others about that. Or, we're talking about what's always right. Let's look at the qualities. Do you have these qualities or more? I mean, what are some of the other qualities that, people talking about helping people do this better? Reflect on these qualities. Maybe look at these 8 qualities and say, well, I got 10 more things that make me and help me feel like I'm there creating value.
I guess if I were going to look back on the year, I was most impressed, and the word I would add was generous. How these people were so generous with their time, with their knowledge, and so generous in sharing what they knew with our audience. And I'm very humbled by their appreciation of you and of what we were doing to be so generous with everything. Is there a word that you want to finish this podcast with today?
And used the words creating value for years. I used to have a newsletter, and I used to have a little section in the newsletter about creating value. So I was stepping into it, and the newsletter was very well thought of. We had lots of subscribers, and there were a lot of things generated from it. So creating value had always been on my mind. I really couldn't articulate it as a practical way as I'd like to. All I know is that the work that we were doing was creating value. Our book, Revolutionary Conversations, is all about, this experience helped me better understand where it has been in our life, because these podcasts were all about conversation. It was an interview, but it was a conversation. We didn't spend time drilling down on someone. We got into a boat and we sailed that boat, and we got to where we wanted to be. So it was refreshing for me to see that what we were stepping into and what we want to do is actually very valuable, very interesting, and it can be converted into things that will help others, help change their world or change others' world as well. If we learn from the wisdom of ourselves as well. So it was joyful, and I'm looking forward to continuing to do it and in many ways apply more things to my practice in doing this, not only from a conversational perspective, but what you mentioned early on, which was helping others. So thank you all.
Yes, thanks everybody. And I hope we were able to identify things that you can apply to your workplace, your home place, your comfy place. Just keep on learning.